Hey, don't you dare try to run away. We decided we were gonna be friends a long time ago. Just because I look more gremlin than girl today doesn't mean you can run away. You have to love me as I am no matter what. Anyway, according to Fable, my biggest genres of the year is romance and fantasy, which is honestly on par for how I usually read, but I am surprised by some other statistics. Shall we go through them? Well, we don't have a choice. First off, by the time you see this, I will have read 59 books. Now, my goal for the year was to read 52 books, so I'm really happy with where we've gotten so far. And because it's the beginning of December, I really am hoping that I can read maybe like 63 books. If I can get to 64, I'll be pretty happy. But it might not happen just because there are a lot of good books that I want to read, but they're also very long and I don't have that much time, so we'll see. Fingers crossed though. But what I really want to talk about today are all the best books that I read this year. So my top 10 out of the 59 books that I've read, and there are some good ones that I haven't mentioned that often. I have mentioned all of them, but some of them I haven't mentioned that often. Now, one of the last books that I read that left a lasting impression on me is the Six of Crows book. Wow, wow, wow. That book floored me. It is high fantasy. There's like a heist going on, so much character development. I literally can't talk anymore because I went into crazy detail in this vlog, but that book really got me. Then another really good book that is personally really important for me is a book called The Mountain Is You. Now, this book is not like the other books. This book is solely focused on just self-development, self-growth, and just trying to get better than your old self, just trying to be better than your oldest self. It's kind of a you versus you type of book. And for me personally, I need that type of book all the time. And I think it can be really hard with self-help books because a lot of them can sound almost gimmicky or repetitive, and I was afraid that this book was going to be like that. But I always try to keep some type of self-help book in rotation for me because it's like, I personally call it like taking my mental vitamins. I take vitamins for my body every single day, but I also need to take vitamins for my mind. So yes, it's fun to read fantasy and romance all the time, but I also need to be grounded in reality as well. And these books do that for me. So I'm always looking for something new just because it can get mundane reading the same books over and over again, and I like to spice it up. And this is how I was going to do that this month, and wow, this book really got to me. So far, as of right now, I've listened to it 4 times. It's just, I keep getting something new and I keep having to get myself to do the work that she's talking about in this book, and it's been a slow process, but it's been a helpful process. So I really enjoyed this book. I think this is one of the books that is going to go into my self-help vault. It's this book. It is the David Goggins book, The Can't Hurt Me. And I think there's one other book, Everything I Know About Love. So those are my top 3 like self-help books, as well as The Body Keeps the Score, but I haven't finished that yet. I can just tell though, it's incredible. But this book was so good. It was honestly exactly what I needed. It's exactly what I need. So I'm going to continue to listen to it over and over again. But if you feel like you're stuck or you see that you have self-sabotaging habits like I personally do, then this book is definitely for you. It really just put a lot of things in perspective for me, and I feel like it's a great reminder of tough love. Sometimes you just need the tough love, and this is the book that will give it to you without making you feel discouraged. So highly recommend. Speaking of Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton, that is my next book on my list. This is a book that I literally still think about at least once a week. It is kind of a self-help book, but it's not like The Mountain Is You. This book really focuses on love and relationships and community and finding yourself, but finding yourself in the way of how we're all trying to find love, basically. And it's just so well done. The humor is wonderful. It's real life. It's a memoir of Dolly Alderton, and it just follows her from her adolescence all the way until her 30s. And it's just so incredible. It's so funny. And one thing that I really love about it is that it's uniquely hers. I've read a few memoirs at this point, and I've never read something like this. She's comical, but she's also very honest, brutally honest. Sometimes when she's making mistakes, it's like, girl, I don't think the FBI could get this out of me. And she's still being honest. She's still being transparent, which is beyond brave. It's so hard to see someone make mistakes like that and still come out on the other side. And that's courage. That's bravery. And it just makes you like in awe of her as a person. And it also makes you feel like a little more human, because it's like, okay, I'm not the only one making this mistake, or, you know, I've never gone that far, but I can understand where she's coming from and things like that. It just makes you more empathetic. It makes you more understood almost. And it was just such a wonderful ride because you see her from a know-it-all teenager all the way until her 30s, where she realizes she never really knew anything. And you see her gather that wisdom though. And by the end of it, you feel like you went through this journey of life with her. You went through the pain, the love, the high points, the low points. And it feels that much more profound because you feel so connected with her story, because she tells it as if you're a fly on the wall. And that in a memoir is very hard to do. And she did a wonderful job. If I'm correct, I think this is her debut novel, which is just insane. It's so good. She has other books and I definitely want to read those other books, but this book I literally think about at least once a week. This is a book I told myself personally I need to read once a year. It almost feels like an older sister is giving you advice, giving you knowledge that you wished you had on your own. And it's just such a beautiful thing because I'm not 30 yet. So I want to feel what she is talking about. I want to understand the things that she's talking about. And each section of her life, I feel like you can constantly get new information, new wisdom. And I think this is a book that every girl should read. Now, this next book honestly surprised me. I've mentioned this a few times by this point in the year, but this book is Funny Story by Emily Henry. And you guys know I was not an Emily Henry fan. I'm honestly still not a fan of her other books, but I'm willing now to give her a chance just because this book is about as good as Love and Other Words to me at this point. Like, it is so freaking good. Miles and Daphne have my heart forever. Miles is the type of guy that I want in real life. He is my book boyfriend standard at this point. It's him and Elliot Petropolis. Those are my standards, okay? And this book just follows just this insane story. I honestly don't know where Emily got this idea from, but it's genius, absolutely genius. So Daphne, she was gonna get married to this other guy. Then a few nights before their wedding, he was like, you know what? I think I'm actually in love with my best friend. I don't want to be with you anymore. You got a week to leave my house. Dang. So she's like in this new town, in his hometown, and she has nowhere to go. But of course, the only other person who understands what she's going through is Miles. And Miles is the guy's best friend's boyfriend.
Wow, man.
And so Daphne is staying in the same house as Miles, same apartment as Miles. Slowly but surely they become friends, and then they're like, you know what? Let's make our exes jealous and let's pretend to be dating. And of course the fake dating turns into real dating, but it's not like your normal fake dating trope. It is just so honest and it's so humbling. Like, they make mistakes, they're embarrassing, they make real human mistakes. And I think that's the element that just brings this book up into like a 6-star level, because I think a lot of the times in romances it's incredible, but you can't really connect to it in real life. It's like movies, like everyone is extra attractive, everyone has their life together, and even if they don't have their life together, they're not making simple mistakes. Like, an example of that in this book is when Daphne and Miles, they first kiss initially to make her ex jealous. And when they first kiss, like, she goes in too hard and he's like, he was gonna do like a peck. And just the fact that she thought to write that is just so amazing, because that's real life. Like, people make mistakes like that. It's embarrassing when you have your first kiss with someone, no matter how many times you've kissed anyone. And it's just, I love that she added that stuff. It just made them human for me. It just humanized the whole situation. It made me feel like it was realistic. I felt like I was genuinely a fly on the wall of their relationship. And the audiobook, first of all, I listened to it with the audiobook, but this is definitely a book I want to reread, but read the physical book. But the audiobook, oh God, still has my heart. I was never an audiobook person, let me tell you. I'll be the first to tell you. I was a skeptic. I did not like audiobooks. I thought it was kind of like cheating. I was that annoying person. And then when I heard this book, it just did it for me. There was something about the inflection in the voices, and the person who reads it, she did Miles's voice, but she like added like some baritone in it. Oh God, it was very good. It felt like he was talking to me. I don't know. It was incredible though. I genuinely felt like I was listening to somebody's life. Like, I felt like it was my neighbor and I just had my ear on their door. It was so good. Highly recommend it. If you haven't read this book yet, try reading it with the audiobook, and maybe you can read along with the physical book, but that did it for me. I was literally kicking my feet, giggling, everything. I will never shut up about this book. I love it just as much as Love and Other Words, and I just thought that would never happen, especially especially with an Emily Henry book. So this was very surprising for me. Now, next up for me is the Harry Potter series. I read this for the first time this year. I have mentioned this a few times, but this really made my whole reading experience for 2024 just elevated a whole new level. I had so much fun being in that world. I was very, very lucky in the fact that I had no spoilers. I had no idea what I was going to get myself into. I didn't know any of the backstory. Literally, if you watch those videos, all I knew is that there were 3 kids, there was some type of magic, and that was it. Like, that's literally all I knew. And wow, was that world incredible. I watched all the movies, I read all the books, and now I am a fan for life. I just remember having so much fun. Those 2.5 months that I read that, I was in a completely different world. I haven't felt that much joy in being in a different world like that since I was a kid. So I had so much fun. Honestly, I think it was one of the best books that I've read this year. And I'm just counting all the books as one single book because obviously there's 8. But I had such a wonderful time. Like, literally, I thought it was so much overhyped BS on the internet. And no, not at all. It was like made for my childhood self. I felt like I was healing my childhood self. And I just had such a wonderful time reading that. I highly recommend that for anyone getting into fantasy or just wants to get lost in a world, because that's exactly what happened to me. Honestly, I would be doing other things in my real life, and again, this rarely happens, and I was itching to read. I'm like, when can I read? When's the next time I can read? And multiple nights within the week, and I'm very like regimented on my schedule, and I would stay up for hours, and I'm like, okay, you read 30 minutes, and that just hasn't happened to me in such a long time. So that book for sure was one of the best books that I read in 2024. Now, another book that I loved this year was The Joy Luck Club. The Joy Luck Club is about these older Chinese women living in California. They migrated from China and they had American daughters. They don't necessarily always get along, but it follows their heritage, their tradition, and how it kind of clashes with the American dream, and how their children have different mindsets than them because obviously they didn't go through the same amount of trauma and trials that they went through. And it is just such a beautiful introspective look of the mother-daughter relationship, cultures outside of America, and just how that clashes with American society and our values. And that book is still something I think about all the time. I read that I think in January or March, I believe, and I still, honest to God, think about it all the time. It's one of those books that I definitely need to reread just because there's so much I still don't understand. There's so much that I think maybe I even forgot and would like to reassess and kind of analyze for myself. And that's just a book that I think everyone should read just because it allows you to be a little bit more grateful and empathetic for your parents or your parent figures and understand that they are human too. They are just people on this earth for the first time as well, and it allows you to give them a little more grace, a little more empathy, and maybe realize where you can be better as well. And that's what it personally did for me. So that's definitely a book I feel like made my reading experience amazing this year. Another good one was The 7-Year Slip. Oh my gosh, this is my first Ashley Poston book. She's written a few of them. I think she also wrote The Dead Romantics. That's not a book that I've read yet, but this is one of them that I read, and it was so good. It was a romance, but so much more than a romance. It follows this woman who's living in New York City who has a magical apartment that allows you to go 7 years back in the past, and she falls in love with someone from that world, but it also kind of clashes with her current reality. And you just follow her going through this process of self-discovery. First of all, she has some other things going on in her personal life, and then also falling in love with this person, seeing if it's something that's sustainable, if it's something that she can bring into the present. It's just something about the writing. It was something about her perspective on grief and self-growth that really just hit a chord in me personally. It was something that kind of blew me away. I didn't expect this book to be that good. I thought it was going to be good because I've heard a lot of great things about this book, but it really left a lasting impression on me. So much so that I was like, I need to read her other books, and that just never happens. Now, another book that did that to me is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. That is a book that I believe I read in June or July, and this romance hit a little too close to home because what the woman was dealing with, the female main character was dealing with, was a lot of like childhood trauma, a lot of personal issues that she was bringing into new relationships, whether it was romantic or friendship wise. And Abby Jimenez has a very funny way of giving you romance, but it's really a cover for some life lessons, for some tough love, and for some gentle parenting, basically. And she The whole goal of this book was to tell people that if you have issues in your life that you're dragging into other relationships, not only is it not fair to you, but it's not fair to the people that you're trying to get into relationships with, whether it's romantic or friendship or whatever. And she gave us like tools to where we can fix it, or we can start looking at these issues in our lives and try to be proactive about it and stop just living the way that we're living and seeing it on a page from someone else's perspective, even if they are obviously fictional, really struck a chord in me, because I'm like, the whole time I'm reading it, I'm like, girl, you do not deserve that. You don't need that person in your life. You have really bad coping mechanisms. You have to grow from that. And then I'm like, wait a second, she's doing what I do. That's not good. And so just getting that wake-up call from her really, really struck a chord in me, because the book was already good, but the fact that it hit so close to home, personally, I was like, wow, she's speaking directly to me. I definitely need to grow and evolve in these ways, and it allowed me to really see myself for what I am and try to start making those initial steps to self-growth. But outside of romance, another good book is What Moves the Dead. This book was my first T. Kingfisher book, and this book was so good. It really felt like it was Coraline or the Corpse Bride-esque. It had that vibe. It gave me that vibe, and I enjoyed every single second. I thought it was eerie. I thought it was creepy. It had points where it was like witty and funny, but you were trying to solve this mystery with them, and I loved it. It was a very short book, but I was eating it up. I literally felt like from the jump I was in the middle of that story, and I had this creepy, eerie feeling, and that's very hard to do, first of all, in a book, period, but in a short book, it's almost impossible to find it done well. The last book that made me feel this way was probably Frankenstein from last year by Mary Shelley, and wow, this was so freaking good. I was like, oh, T. Kingfisher doesn't play around. I need to read her other books. She is that girl. It is so incredible. The detail, the wit, the attention to detail that you need for the entire story to come together. It was just so wonderful. I loved that book so much, and I was very surprised. I didn't expect much from it. I just was like, oh, this is a rendition of an Edgar Allan Poe poem. Let's see what it's about. Let's see if she does a good job. And wow, did she do a good job. I had such a good time reading it. I just literally could not believe I enjoyed it so much. And last but not least is a book that I literally finished today, which is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Now, this is a book that we were reading in my book club, my Patreon book club, which is linked down below. I honestly had high hopes for it just because it was a book that was really well regarded, especially by a lot of the Barnes & Noble reps that I speak to every time we do a Barnes & Noble bookstore vlog. And wow, did it live up to the hype. I literally have never highlighted so much of a book, and this is a thick book. It's over 400 pages long. I believe it's like 448 pages, and the story was consistently incredible. It consistently made me reevaluate my life. It consistently gave us things to talk about and topic discussions to discuss in book club that I did not expect at all. I found myself really like being introspective and trying to see where I can get better, if I'm falling to the same traps as these fictional characters are. And wow, there were some times where I was like, dang, I kind of do that. Or dang, I'm taking my life for granted. Or I'm wasting time as if it's not the only real asset we have, the only real currency we have in this life. And it just makes you think about every single thing all at once. It's really incredible. If you read this book, I highly recommend reading it with someone else, just because there are so many good discussions you can have from it. I literally had such a fun time reading it. I had such a fun time reading it in book club specifically, just because we could really delve into our personal lives and see how it relates to the story, if we would have done the same things in those scenarios if we were in that situation. And it was just all around such a good, thought-provoking book. Now, those are my top 10 books for 2024. Honestly, going into the year every year, I never know what books I'm going to enjoy. I never know what books I'm really going to read, honestly. And looking back, it's so interesting because last December, I wouldn't have known I would have read these books. I wouldn't have had any idea that these were the books that were going to get me. So it's so cool to see. I am one more year into reading. I'm one more year into finding new books that I like, new genres that I like, and it's just so wonderful. I genuinely love books so much. It's such a serious passion of mine, and I'm so glad that we have this community where we can talk about our passions and talk about books that really impacted us and try to recommend them to other people and see if we can change someone else's life too. So I just wanted to say I love y'all so much. Please let me know what books that you loved this year, what were your top 10, your top 5, and if you have any specific books that you think that I would love just based off of my recommendations and based off the books that I love from this year. Now that is it from me. I love y'all so much, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.